Hey there, welcome to the course. I'm super glad that you decided to take the leap and jump into this course. All right, so in this section, what we're going to do is we are going to cover a few basics of CSS Grid, SCSS, and FlexBox, all right? After this section, we'll jump into our SCSS dev environment, but I just want to give you a few quick wins so that we can basically get an idea of what we're going to be building throughout this course and how rewarding it can actually be, all right? So I'll see you guys in just a second. All right, welcome. Let's go ahead and open up Chrome, and you're going to want to go to codepen.io. It's a website, codepen.io, and create a free account there. All right, so right here you can see some code I've written, and this is what it does, right? It's a basic navbar using FlexBox. That's what we're going to do, and it also has some animations, and it opens up to external links, right? So let's go ahead and recreate this project. And that will give you a little sense of what we are going to accomplish throughout this course, because you'll see how quickly we can actually get results with these tools. So let's go ahead and open up a new CodePen. I'm going to go to the CodePen home here, and I'm going to create a new pen. All right, create pen. And then you're going to see a screen like this if you just barely started using CodePen. I think this is the default view. I've zoomed in a bit. Yours is going to be a bit smaller. I'm going to pull the JS tab to the side, and then I'm going to pull this in the middle. And then let's enable SCSS by hitting this gear icon and going to CSS preprocessor and selecting SCSS. Let's go ahead and save our project, and we now have access to SCSS. Now, in that example I just showed you, I didn't actually use SCSS, but I want to show you how to use SCSS as soon as we can. Okay, so HTML. Let's go ahead and write a div, and this div will have a class of navbar. Next thing we're going to do is enable some A tags, and these are going to have hrefs and targets. You can use either ticks like that or whatever these are called. I can't even remember what they're called. Quotation marks. All right, so target is going to be blank on each of these. First one's going to say Twitter, and then let's put in a URL here. Let's say https twitter.com/maxcodes1. Copy that a couple times and change this one to YouTube. Change that to just Max Codes. Change this to Instagram. And change this to maxcodes.io. Now, obviously, I'm putting my links here because I want you to follow me. So I'm not going to be lying to you, trying to scheme and get you to follow me. If you want to follow me, you can. Okay, but really, I just want to show you the power of links as well and FlexBox. So let's go ahead and name this one YouTube. And let's name this one Instagram. As a matter of fact, I'm going to call this free content because that's really what YouTube is. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to enable some default styles. So let's go to our SCSS here and let's say .navbar, and let's nest an A tag in here since you can do that in SCSS. Next thing we're going to do is just style up our navbar here by saying height 56 pixels and width 200 pixels. Let's go with 300 pixels actually. Next thing we're going to do is just say background is gray. And border radius is 4 pixels, okay? So go ahead and pause the video if you need to and get this content in there, and then we can continue. Don't want to be leaving you behind. I know how annoying fast videos can be. And yeah, let's go ahead and color our links now. Let's say color is ghost white. And then we'll say text decoration line is none. And font family is Helvetica, a clean Apple font. All right, so you can see now that we're actually getting somewhere really quickly, and that's what I love about CSS and SCSS is that it's just super easy once you get the hang of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and utilize FlexBox. And before we do that, I want to show you a guide that I refer to every now and then on Medium. So this is going to be in the content description of this lecture. All right, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to scroll down here, not really worry about most of this. I'll explain it. But first thing I want to point out is the align right here. You can see that we have this align property. And then back in our CodePen, you can see that we kind of want our content to be centered there. So that's where align items comes in. I'll scroll down here to align items, or I'll search for it because I'm not going to find it in this huge article just by scrolling. And you can see that we kind of want this align items center. Okay, we need to set align items to center to get that effect. So let's go back to CodePen and enter that in. Let's say first display flex to create our flex container. And then we'll say align items is center. And you can see it automatically aligns it. So super, super simple. Now we need to center it the other way, right? Let's go ahead and refer back to this article and see how we might do that. Okay, so it should be justify content. You can see that if we set justify content to space in between, we can get an effect like that. Let's go ahead and try that, except for we're going to change it to space around, and I'll tell you the difference between the two. So let's say justify content is space between, and you can see that it looks really clean. But if we say space around, it will put space around the entire flex container items, okay? Not just in between our items. All right, so that's super clean. Let's go ahead and add in some animations and then wrap this video up and then hop into some CSS grid. Okay, so let's go down here and let's just say A, and then we'll say and hover and active. And this ampersand is literally just translated to A, okay? Or whatever's there. If we said ASDF, it would translate to ASDF. Okay, so we'll talk more about that in some of the bonus sections. All right, so we need to say transform, translate, and we're just gonna make it a bit bigger using scale, not translate, 1.01. Let's copy that, paste it here, and say 0.98. Okay, now when you hover over it, it will get a bit bigger, and when you click on it, it gets a bit smaller. We need it to be smooth though, so we'll say transition is all 0.3 seconds ease. Now when we go into our navbar here, you can see it kind of eases into it and it looks really clean. Okay, so that's it in this video. I really hope you learned a bit about how this all works. If I went too fast for you, just go ahead and rewatch it, pause it here, or click the link to this project in the section description resources, okay? I'll see you all in the next video where we will cover CSS Grid. See you in a second. Hey, and welcome to this lecture where I'm going to show you how to build out this photo grid very quickly. You'll be surprised how easy it is. And it's going to be using a couple resources that I want to show you in this guide as well, specifically Unsplash, all right? So let's go ahead and open up CodePen. I have it open right here. I've written the code out so I could show you what we're going to be building. And now I'm going to basically delete it all and show you how to build it, okay? So it's very simple. Let's go ahead and I will explain it as we type it out, okay? So I'm going to create a div. And then we're just going to give this div a class of photo-layout, okay? Now, what we're going to do is put some images in here, like you just saw, and we're going to give it a source, and we're going to say https:// and we'll say source.unsplash.com/random. Okay, now real quick, this website was down a couple days ago for me, source.unsplash, so I don't know if it will work all the time. It was probably a very rare thing that happened, but if for some reason it's not fetching the photos, what I would do is try this, except for use via.placeholder, say https:// via.placeholder.com, and just say like /150 by 150, okay? And also put a slash after the random and say 150 by 150, okay? Basically, this via.placeholder, if I reload this page, it's just gonna give you a random, or not a random image, just a placeholder image, okay? So you can use that resource if Unsplash is not working for you, but in all likelihood, it's gonna be working for you. Like, it's almost probably not even worth mentioning because it's so unlikely for it to not work. But basically, just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out for at least, even if there's one person who has that problem, okay? So what we're gonna do is get rid of that, and then I'm gonna say 200 by 200, and basically that's what I'm gonna see. The reason I'm using Safari in a separate browser is because I have my code zoomed in here, right? and it zooms in the image and makes it look all bad. So I've opened up another browser in which I'm using CodePen here. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's put on some more images here so we can get that grid in and see where we need to use it. This time I'm not going to use random. I'm going to use /user, and then I'm going to say / and then I'm going to say max codes. Okay, so that's going to be my profile on Unsplash, and then let's do the same here, except for let's do a profile called Alex Isia, and he's a guy, he's a bro that I met on Instagram actually. So I'm going to let him know that I've put this in my course, and he'll probably like that. Go follow him on Instagram. He probably wants that plug. So basically, this is what you're going to see, okay? He has really clean images. Mine aren't as clean as his, but yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at the resources real quick before we continue. Okay, we have unsplash.com, just tons of random free images. It's actually kind of amazing. It's almost too good to be true. So I'm going to click on my profile. That's my profile on Unsplash. And Alex Asia's is right here. Okay, so basically 2 really good profiles, mostly his. Mine's not that great compared to his. But yeah, those are our resources. And then source.unsplash. Okay, this is how I know how to use the random images, is source.unsplash.com. It basically explains everything about getting random images from specific users. We are getting them from a specific user, in this case, my profile and Alex's, right? So yeah. And notice how you can grab it a specific dimension. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're saying 200 by 200. Okay, so without explaining that too much, let's go ahead and copy this a few times. And then we're gonna see a problem with our HTML here. Okay, we'll copy it, and then I'll change like one of these to user, and then Kevin, he's a homie. I met him on Instagram as well. But yeah, I'll actually do his for 2 because I don't want my photos appearing twice. But basically, if you reload the page, you'll now see this, okay? Now, this is super sick and it works really well, but it's kind of all over the place, right? So let's go ahead and fix that by creating a CSS grid, okay? Now in here, I've selected SCSS, but I'm actually not going to use it in this video, but feel free to select that if you want. So we're just going to say photo-layout. And if you didn't get all that HTML, I'll let you pause it right now and get that in. Okay. Now what we're going to do is basically make a 3x3 grid. So the way we can do that is by saying display grid template rows, and then just saying 200 pixels, 200 pixels, 200 pixels, and then grid template columns, 200 pixels, 200 pixels, 200 pixels. Okay. Now I'm going to open up Firefox and actually show you the CSS grid dev tools in Firefox if it installs in this video. I wasn't planning on doing this, but they're so good that I feel like I should show you, okay? Now, I'll just show you in Safari here if that doesn't load up in time. But basically, I want to explain to you what's going on here with the rows and columns. And yeah, see, you can't really see in Safari. They don't even have it, or I haven't even reloaded it. So yeah, let's inspect it. And then now you'll see that, yeah, it's still hard to see in Safari. Okay, but with Firefox, if we were to go to our CodePen here and then inspect the element, we can see the SCSS or the CSS grid tools, and they're very, very good. Okay, that's the only reason I have Firefox installed, is to use the grid tools when I need them. Okay, you'll see when we inspect and we open this up and I click on that, you can see that we have div.photo layout. Basically all things we're going to mark with grid are going to appear in here as a grid, and then it's going to show us the grid in Firefox. And notice how when I hover over this, it's going to show you where it is there. Okay, so what we've done here is we've created 3 200 pixel rows. So one there, one there, and one there. And then the same thing with columns, one there, one there, one there. So we get a 3x3 grid. So it's actually really simple and it's really awesome, okay? And we'll talk more about what these numbers mean later in the course, but they're actually really helpful as well, okay? Until you get to your own naming of columns. Okay, now what we're gonna do before I end this video is add some grid gaps so we have space between these photos, because it doesn't look great how it is, right? So let's go into photo layout and let's just say grid gap, and we'll say 20 pixels. And then I'll go back to Firefox since that's what we're using now. And you'll see that we now have this grid gap, okay? Now let me explain one more thing before we end it. We can use grid column gap, 20 pixels, right? And then if we reload the page, it's only going to be on the columns, okay? Now, if we do the same thing except for rows, grid row gap, it's only going to be on the rows, as you would imagine, right? So what we need to do is we need to basically just leave it as grid gap, because that's going to say grid column gap and row gap, and it's just going to put it in both columns. But you might, for example, want to have a grid column gap of 50 pixels and a grid row gap of only 20 pixels, or let's say 10 pixels to make the difference more relevant, right? Okay, so you can see that that could be useful for you if you were doing a grid that needed specific column and row gaps, okay? Now, that's all I wanted to explain in this video. Don't want it to go on too long because I want to jump into the actual bulk of this course and get you some real value here. This is valuable too, but I want to really get into the course now, okay? So in the next section, we're going to build out that SCSS dev environment. So I'll see you in a second. Hey there, great job in going through that first section. You now have a basic understanding of CodePen, SCSS, CSS Grid, and FlexBox, and a few other things. All right, now that we have that basic understanding and a few quick wins, let's go ahead and jump into the next section where we're gonna build out our SCSS dev environment with tools like NPM, Node Sass, and Live Server. All right, I'll see you guys in just a second. Hey, and welcome back to the SCSS Navbar course. My name is Max, and today we are going to build out an SCSS dev environment with tools like NodeMon, Sass obviously, Live Server, NPM, and more. So let's go ahead and jump into this section and get it done quickly so we can get into building those Navbars. Hey there, and welcome back to the course. I'm super glad that you made it through that first section where you learned how to use tools like CodePen, SCSS preprocessor in CodePen.io, CSS Grid, FlexBox, and a little bit more. Now, in this section, we're going to basically build out our SCSS dev environment that we're going to use throughout this project. All right, now we're not going to use this very one that we're building throughout the entire project, but we're going to use the skills that we've learned in this section, that we will learn in this section, in the rest of our course. All right. So let's go ahead and get started by talking about what exactly we're going to do in this video. And that is basically go over our tools that we're going to need. We're going to install Node, and we're going to set up our project. So let's go ahead and go to nodejs.org, and you're going to want to install the 10.15.1 version of Node. Okay. Now, if you click that, you're going to get a little DMG. Just open that up and go through the installer. It's very quick and it's very easy. And it comes with NPM. That's the whole reason we're installing Node, really. And that's because we're going to be using these packages in the next couple videos, okay? But before you get into that, let's go ahead and actually build our project, okay? So download that, get it installed, and then go to your terminal and say node-v, and you're going to see 10.15.1. Now, if you're watching this in the future, there's actually a huge chance that it's going to be a different version. That doesn't matter. It should work just fine. And if it ever does become a problem, I will update the course as soon as one of you notifies me on my Twitter or my YouTube channel, or here even. I totally forgot you could comment on here. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we are going to basically create our project now. So go to wherever you want to place it, and let's just type in mkdir and let's say SCSS dev env. Next thing you're going to want to do is cd into that. And then now you can open that up in your code editor, and it's going to be a blank project, but I'm actually going to create the files in the terminal. So I'm going to say touch index.html, and then I'm going to type in mkdir, SASS, and then mkdir, and then CSS. Okay, so type in those three commands, and then we're going to need to create two files in our Sass folder and our CSS folder. So cd into your Sass folder and say mkdir and say main.scss. Make sure it's SCSS, not SASS. Cd back out and cd into your CSS folder, and then say touch and say main.css. Okay, so that was a little bit quick, and you might not have caught that all. If you didn't, just fill out all those commands and it should be great. And if you're still a bit confused, let's go ahead and open it up in our editor and you'll see what it looks like. Now, before you open it up in your code editor, like I just tried to do here, what you're going to want to actually do is cd back one. So you're back in your SCSS dev environment, type in ls, and you'll see your project here. Now you're going to want to open it up in your code editor. Okay. Now, if you don't have that code command installed and you don't have VS Code, it's likely that that's not going to work. Just make sure that you open up this folder in your SCSS. Okay. So make sure you open up your SCSS dev environment folder we just created inside of your code editor. I use Visual Studio Code, and that's what I'm going to be using throughout this course. Although it doesn't matter what you use, Sublime Text, Atom, whatever you want to use, you can use brackets. And this is what we got, okay? Now, I made a mistake when I created main.scss and I created a directory. What we want to do is delete that, and we want to create that as a file. So let's say main.scss. So this is our project structure. Now, if you're very confused because I made a couple mistakes here, you can just download this right now. I have the starter project there, and then I have the end of this section project down there too, okay? So go ahead and make sure your environment looks like this. Go into your index.html and let's just type in HTML5, and it should auto-generate if you're using VS Code. If you're not, just go ahead and pause the video and copy this down. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to say SCSS dev env, and then I'm going to put a div. I'm going to give it a class of layout, and I'm just going to say layout. Okay. Next thing you're going to want to do is basically just right click that, hit reveal in Finder, and open this up in Chrome. And you're going to see your HTML there on the screen. All right. Now, that's all that I'm going to cover in this video. In the next video, we are going to build out our layout and then put some CSS on the screen, and then we'll install Node.sass to get our Sass installed, to get our Sass compiling into our main.css, okay? I'll see you guys in the next video. Welcome back. Great job at going through that first video in this section. Let's go ahead and link our SCSS file, and then let's install Node.sass with npm and get our SCSS install or compiling down to CSS. And then I'll explain it all a bit so it's all clear to you what's going on. Because at first glance, it's going to be a bit random to you and you might not know what's going on, okay? Now on line 6 here, I'm going to link my style sheet. So I'm going to say link, and I'm going to say rel is equal to style sheet. And then I'm going to say type is equal to text/CSS. And then finally, our href is going to be our CSS. So we're going to say CSS/main.css, okay? Go ahead and close that off, and we've now linked our style sheet. So we can go to our layout here, and then we can go into main.scss, and we can style it a bit. So I'm just going to say .layout. I'm going to say height is 100 view height, width is 100 view width, and then I'm going to give it a background of crimson. Go ahead and save that, and then give it a font size of 24 pixels, save that as well. And then we'll open up Chrome, reload the page, and that's what you're gonna see. Okay, so we've successfully linked our style sheet, and now we need to basically set up Node.sass so that we can instead write our styles into main.scss here, and then have it compile down into our CSS, and then ultimately be importing into our index.html. So right now, if we go into SCSS and say layout, no matter what we put in here, it's not going to change this, okay? So that's what we need to change. We need this to be modifying and basically compiling down into our main.scss. Okay, so what we need to do is cut this out of our main CSS, paste it into our main.scss, and then now our main.css is empty, and our main.scss has our styles. Okay, let's go back to our Chrome page, reload it, and you'll see all the styles are gone. So again, we know what's going on here. It's just not working, right? So let's go ahead and figure out how we can compile this down into CSS so that it goes into our CSS folder. Okay. Okay, so this is done by going to npmjs.com/package/node-sass. I'll put this in the resources below, and then we can basically talk about it right now, okay? You don't really have to come here, but if you want to, it's down there, okay? All we need to run is npm-i or npm-i node-sass, okay? I'm going to install it a bit differently by installing it to my dev dependencies. And we don't really need to talk about how all this works because this is a little bit advanced. We just need to install it and then I'll show you how it works. Okay. So let's go ahead and go to our code. Let's open up the terminal again. I'll use this terminal instead of the integrated terminal that I have in VS Code. And in our folder, what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to say npm install. I'll make it a bit bigger so we can see the whole line. And then we're going to say --save--dev, and we'll say node-sas. Give it a second, and once that's installed, we can talk about our package.json file. All right, so you can see that it doesn't work, and that's because we don't have our package.json. So before we can install anything with npm, you need to learn that we need to initialize our npm project, right? So let's go ahead and clear our terminal and say npm init. That's going to basically create our project. You can go ahead and just hold return, and then all that will kind of fill out on its own. It doesn't need to be filled out specifically. All right, so let's go ahead and now try installing it by hitting up on the arrow key till we get back to our line that we wrote earlier. npm install --save--dev node-sas, and it will work this time instead of not working. Okay, now in the corner of your eye, as that was installing, you might have seen that this node modules folder appeared. This is basically just all of our code that's installed by our package.json. Now, I don't want to make this course all about Node and all that. I have other courses for that. I want this to be about SCSS and Sass. So let's not worry too much about what node modules is, but let's just skip to package.json and talk about our dependencies a bit. Okay, so we have node-sas in here as a dev dependency, and then now we can use it in our scripts here to basically do what we want to do, okay? So I'm going to close out those SCSS files. I'm going to close out my index.html file, and I'm actually going to open up my SCSS files next to each other, my CSS files. Oops, I want it to go below it. Okay, there we go. So we're going to write a script basically that will take our SCSS, compile it down into CSS with node-sas, and it will put it into our main.css. Okay, so let's get rid of this default script and let's write our own. Let's call it compile, okay, or let's just call it Sass. Okay, now what this script needs to do is it needs to use node-sas. We'll say node-sas, and then we'll say Sass / main.scss, and then a space, and then we'll say CSS / main.css. Okay, that's our script. Now when we run it, it's going to copy this, compile it down into CSS, and put it into our CSS file. And then ultimately our index.html file is going to read our CSS file and do exactly what it should, which is just read the code from CSS and apply it to our index.html. So let's go ahead and run that command, and you'll see in the corner of your eye again behind your terminal that it's going to basically take all this SCSS stuff and replace whatever's in our CSS file. So that .layout is going to be replaced with .layout. But yeah, let's go ahead and say npm run, and we'll just say Sass because that's what we called it. All right, you'll see that it automatically basically puts this code in here in a little tidier of a format so that it can be read faster by the computer. Okay, now let's go ahead and look in our browser now and reload the page, and you'll see that we have our code here. So that is how we use node-sas in our project to compile SCSS down into CSS. Now you probably have a ton of questions, and you might be wondering, okay, this code looks exactly the same as this though. What is the advantage here? And the advantage is we can now use things like mixins, variables, and stuff like that in SCSS. So let's go ahead and hop into the next video where we will take a deeper look at our SCSS, and we're going to actually modify our script a little bit so that whenever we make a change, for example, if I change this to a blue color, it will actually update automatically, because you can see it won't update automatically. We'd have to run that command again. So I'll talk about that in the next video, and I'll see you in just a second. All right, great job in going through that last video where we learned how to use Node.sass and a bunch of NPM junk. And you're now ready to actually learn a bit more about Sass and why we're using it, specifically the advantages we have in Sass and some of the things we can do with it, okay? So let's go ahead and hop into this video by first talking a bit about variables, okay? Up here in main.scss, I'm gonna go up here and I am going to add a $sign and then I'm gonna say background, okay? I'll say background dash, no, I'll just say background color with a capital C, and then I'll put a colon, and let's just take this blue and cut it using Command X and paste it there. And then I'm going to use it in background color, okay? And we'll see how this compiles down once we run our compile script one more time, okay? So I'm gonna open up my terminal, and I'm actually gonna start using the integrated terminal. So I'm gonna minimize that, and in VS Code, it has a terminal on the side. So that's what I'll be using. Feel free to use whatever you want. Some editors like Sublime don't have an integrated terminal, so you might need to use the one we've been using. I'm gonna, however, use this one integrated within VS Code. Okay, so I'm gonna run our command one more time, which is npm run sass. If you run that, it's going to compile it, and you'll see it automatically updates in our main CSS folder. You'll see it takes the color, it puts it as the background color, and it even goes as far as compiling it down into a decimal hex color rather than an RGB. So that's just how it compiles. That's how Node.sass was written. The dependency, the code for Node.sass made it do that. And yeah, now you can kind of see why we would use SCSS. You probably already knew the direction this was going in, but basically we can use cool things like variables and mixins and then compile it down into CSS. So let's try a mixin. So we'll say mixin at mixin, and we'll just say dimensions, right? And then dimensions, we're just gonna put the height and width in there, okay? And then now we can just say at include dimensions, okay? So, and a mixin really is a function. That's why I automatically use those parentheses. But in the bonus section on like SCSS, specific concepts, I'll talk more about that. And just throughout building the course. Okay, so you can see that. And then you'll also notice one more problem before we compile this. And that is the very problem, is it doesn't automatically compile when we save our code. Let's go ahead and add a flag to our script so that whenever a file is changed, it will automatically run that script. Okay, so in our package.json, where our command is, at the end of it, let's just put a space and then dash and then W. Okay, that stands for watch. And basically what's gonna happen is whenever we make a change in our SCSS files, it's going to basically change it and it will compile down into CSS. So let's try changing the color. Let's see, it's not letting me hover over that. But yeah, I'll change it to like a yellow or a greenish, and then I'll hit save. Okay, I guess it turned into black. But I'll just go over it and say cornflower blue. Save that, and then it should automatically, we'll have to run it one more time. So run the command one more time, and then now it will automatically be compiling down whenever we make a change. So if I change this cornflower blue to like a red and hit save, you'll notice it automatically updates. So really convenient. And then now in our project, when we hit Command R, it automatically changes. So let's try changing the color to a blue. Let's just say, or a lime green. Let's say lime green, just because we did blue already. And you'll notice it automatically updates. And then you'll notice that in our browser, however, it doesn't automatically reload. Okay, so when we hit Command R, it obviously changes, but we need a way to basically have it automatically update whenever we make an update there. So we got one of those pieces down. We have it automatically compiling. Now we just need our actual application to reload like it exists on a server. So let's go ahead and hop into the next video where I will discuss live server and that NPM package and how we can use it. It's super simple to use, and it's actually going to be a very short video, 2 minutes max. So let's go ahead and hop into it. All right, welcome back to the course. Great job in going through those last couple of videos. They were a bit confusing, I'm sure, to at least a number of you because of the JavaScript side of things. Now, we're going to wrap up this section here by not only having this automatically compile into CSS like we did in the last video, but also having our page automatically reload. Now that seems kind of trivial, but it's actually extremely important when it comes to our own resources as a developer. We want to maximize our results and have as much willpower remaining as we can, right? So what we need to do is make this automatically reload so we don't have to think about reloading. We don't have to come here and hit Command R, stuff like that, okay? Now it's super simple, and we can do it with an NPM package called Live Server. Now this is what you see here on the screen, and there is a link to this resource in the description below. So all we need to do is install Live Server globally, okay? Now this is something that you should probably understand before continuing with JavaScript, at least, is that we're installing it as a global dependency, which means once you've installed this, you never have to install it again. So for example, if I have another SCSS course up and you go and buy it and you go through it, when I go through Live Server, you wouldn't need to install this again because you did it in this course. So let's go ahead and install this, and it should be installed globally on your computer from here on out. So we'll be able to use it throughout the rest of the course. So what you're going to want to do is copy that command, or just type it in over here and open up a new terminal window, because you need to have this continue to run. You need your Sass script to continue to run. So I've opened up an additional terminal window. If you're using the standard terminal, what you want to do is open up a new terminal window or a new tab on the same terminal window. As long as you have this running, you are good, okay? So go ahead and paste that in, or type it in, npm install -g live-server. And then now what's going to happen is it's going to install it globally on your system. If you get an error, you might need to type sudo before npm. So if you get an error, just type in the same command except for with sudo before npm. So sudo npm install -g live-server. Now, if you get some errors, that's totally fine, or warnings. You can see that I have a couple warnings myself. Don't even worry about those. That's all they are warnings. They're not errors. Okay. So once that's installed, I've already installed it too, which means it probably had something to do with that. But basically, once you have it installed, all you have to do is say live-server, just type in live server in your directory with your index.html in it, right? So our very project root directory. And you'll see once you type in live server, it automatically kind of opens up in Chrome. So this is super cool, because now if I pull this over and close out my package JSON, now when you change anything in your main.scss, for example, if we change this blue and then we add in a color of black, or let's say ghost white for our text, notice how right as we save that, it automatically updated. So I'll just change like the font family now. I'll go in here and I'll say font-family is Helvetica. And then I hit save, it automatically updates. Okay. We could say like padding is 100 pixels, automatically updates. Okay. So that's how you use Live Server in our SCSS dev environment. And that's how we set up our SCSS dev environment in whole. So I really hope you enjoyed this section, and I hope you learned something. This should be of great value to you. And even if you don't even continue with the course, this should have already provided you with a lot of value. So let's go ahead and hop into the next section where we're going to build out our very first project, the twitter.com navbar. I'll see you guys in just a second. Hey there, great job in going through that last section. You now have the skills to build out a custom SCSS dev environment for your projects. Let's go ahead and jump into the next section where we're going to build out our very first navbar in this course. See you in a second.